So I flew all the way to Toronto to see the brand new David Fincher movie, The Killer. That's it. That's the video.
Yeah, I hopped on a plane and flew 2 hours to Toronto just so I could see this movie in a theater. Is that the dumbest thing I've done for a video?
What's the dumbest thing you've done for a video?
Well, I watched The Human Centipede.
Okay, so it might actually be the dumbest thing I've done to see a movie. Especially since I had no idea what it was about. I knew the title, I knew it was David Fincher, and that was all I wanted to know before going into that theater. So I'm not gonna go through this movie point by point. It's not really a movie I can spoil, but if you don't want to know anything about it, watch it first. But before we get into my journey with it, a little no spoiler rundown on The Killer is a career killer obsessed with precision does what he never does, messes up. Pushing him into a spiral to try to reclaim that control, self-preservation, and revenge. And we'll touch on all that more soon, but first, why the hell did I get on a plane to see this movie? Well, on Wednesday the 25th of October, I booted up the old stream to cash in on some nostalgia with Pokemon cards when someone asked a very simple question. Are you going to see The Killer? And I said, of course I'm going to see The Killer. I love David Fincher, a regular cinesimp over here, the kind of person that people love to roll their eyes at. But then I looked it up and realized that while it was playing in theaters starting that very weekend, it was a limited release and wasn't going to be anywhere near me. My choices were wait until it comes out on Netflix, which I didn't want to do, but you can do right now, drive 8+ hours round trip alone, or hop on a plane for about half the total travel time. And you can see what won. This is my job. One could argue that it's my job to spend money to go to the movie theater. It's for business. Now I have very strong memories of all the Fincher movies I've ever seen. Coming home from Zodiac and reading through pages and pages about the cases and how Fincher adapted it, my friend cheering on the metal dildos scene in Dragon Tattoo while the people around us looked uncomfortable. Even the ones I didn't see in theaters, I literally remember the first time I watched them and who I was with. They just kind of have that kind of impact. Since I've been legally able to, I've watched David Fincher movies in theaters. With Mank being the exception, I wasn't really in a position where I could even think to justify flying to a different province to watch a movie at the time, but this time I didn't want to miss out. So, on that evening, I came up with the incredibly foolish idea to fly into Toronto in the morning, catch the movie at the TIFF Lightbox, and catch a flight home almost immediately after. It was a precision plan. I wouldn't have to spend money on a hotel, I'd still have time to get work done before the movie, and just enough time to comfortably get to the airport after the screening finished. I managed to catch some very reasonably priced flights, even though the flight was in like 2 days and on a Friday, so I pulled the trigger. And honestly, after all was said and done, I do think watching The Human Centipede is the dumbest thing I've done for this channel. So on Friday, October 27th, I set out. I got into town, I scoped the situation, posted up with good visibility, met up with a colleague for light lunch before heading into my favorite auditorium in all of Toronto. I got my soda pop, my popcorn, and I was excited to catch my first Fincher flick on the big screen in almost 10 years. 10 years? Jesus. Anyway. And immediately I'm pulled into the cinematography, enveloped in the precision of the craft, the incredible performances, deadpan dialogue that somehow leads to a much funnier experience than I ever could have anticipated. A killer so precise he needs to listen to the Smiths and only the Smiths to center himself while he works. Honestly, at times the whole movie feels like a big joke, like he's telling us the job isn't for people who can't handle boredom, before plunging us into a 20-ish minute monologue while a man does yoga and sleeps on sheetrock. The movie is shockingly funny for the subject matter, either through reactions, on-screen bits like him staking out in an abandoned WeWork, and all of his aliases being the names of sitcom characters. Constantly being told about the precision, the mastery, following the rules, which is almost always followed up by him messing up.
Fuck. Shit.
And after it's all done and picked apart, it was pretty good. Let's explore! Based on the French graphic novel of the same name, Fincher once again brings his very procedural style to a Hitman story that often feels like an insight into his own method of making movies. Our no-name but many alias killer regularly recites a slew of personal mantras to keep him focused and successful in his endeavors. But then he slips up, making the mantra feel like more of a reminder, a way to get him back into a more calculated, precise way of being.
Stick to your plan. Anticipate. Don't improvise. Fight only the battle you're paid to fight. Forbid empathy.
While ultimately abandoning it at every turn. But just looking at that initial precision and obsession with the details, Kinda seems similar to how I imagine Fincher approaches filmmaking. It's no secret that David Fincher expects a lot on his sets. He's notorious for having a clear vision and averages a significantly higher number of takes compared to other directors. But because he's so meticulous on set, those additional takes don't seem to take any longer. But I'm sure that no matter how much planning, how much setting up, mistakes are still gonna happen. And this movie is definitely interested in how those mistakes would shake out with an erotic professional.
He's looking for perfection, and to do that within a take. You're looking to do everything exactly as it should be.
I'm sure that comparison to his method of filmmaking wouldn't specifically be the intention. None of the movie feels like it's a self-insert. It is genuinely engaging with the concept of the hitman. It's just also very interested in that idea of like perfectionism and what happens when you start messing up. But it was kind of a weird experience where it simultaneously felt like the most David Fincher I'd ever seen and also like the least David Fincher I'd ever seen. Maybe it's because this is the first time it really feels like we're looking through that lens versus what that lens captures. The process versus the outcome. Now, if you haven't gathered based on what I've already said, this is a very monologue-driven movie, which I don't personally mind, and after reading the graphic novel it's based on, Andrew Kevin Walker, who you may recognize as the writer of Seven, did a great job capturing that aspect of the story while still crafting it more to this movie's vision. And so much of the time, those monologues feel more like he's writing an autobiography rather than providing us with exposition. Almost like this is the way he started crafting his thoughts as a result of the frequent isolation, even questioning his own sanity at times. But the one thing he never seems to question is what he's actually doing. He has no guilt, no regrets, no second thoughts.
Nothing I've ever done will make any dent in these metrics. I'm not here to take sides. It's not my place to formulate any opinion.
This mantra he follows really is just a set of rules to mentally separate himself from other people who kill for the sake of killing. He absolutely enjoys what he does. It's just that idea around the killer that wouldn't immediately present themselves as a monster that entertained Fincher.
My hope is that someone will see this film and get very nervous about the person behind them in line at Home Depot.
That at any moment you could be near someone so evil in the most banal of ways. I guess overall it starts feeling like we're following a killer in one of Fincher's other movies rather than a protagonist, and sometimes I think that really works, and other times it can just feel a little bit lacking, like there isn't just something to really get your hands into, but that could change on repeat viewings. Because sometimes it really is the more mundane aspects of this story that end up being the most interesting. Like there's no urgency to the impending kills the way you might expect. There's no thundering music or quick cuts. Well, outside the Smiths, of course. You'll get some of that in a really cool action sequence, but it really is just about that process. Again, it's very similar to how movies are made. And that's not gonna work for a lot of people, but I did genuinely love getting inside this guy's mind, especially when it does become more about trying to mentally reboot himself. When the mantra becomes less of a mantra and more of an instruction guide to get him back to that perfect machine he used to be.
Stick to your plan. Stick to the plan. Anticipate. Don't improvise. Fight only the battle you're paid to fight.
While then abandoning it at any moment it stops being convenient. He'll say it's all for money, but he has enough of that to disappear forever. He says never to let it get personal before he descends into a revenge mission.
So the corpses that he leaves on the side of the road as he goes, they don't fit in any way, shape, or form into his mantra.
Because that's what kicks this whole thing off. For all his talk of precision, routine, heart rate, and patience, the killer slips up, shoots a bystander, and misses the chance to get the right target before rapidly vacating the country back to his home base in the Dominican Republic. And he's shook the whole time, assumes he's being followed, redirects multiple times, which means he's not home when people do come to find him, and they only find his partner instead. Though I gotta say, booby-trapping the hotel door? I will be implementing that. So this is where the rules really just start going out the window. Things are personal now, even if he doesn't want to admit it. There's a revenge mission here. And while I do think he cares that this woman has been hurt, I don't know if this is a reaction of love or out of principle. We don't really get enough time with her or his thoughts of her to know.
Nothing like this will ever be allowed to happen again.
It does look like he cares, but these are essentially the thoughts of a sociopath, and they're always at the surface level, never the subconscious. He's not even engaging with the subconscious. Though Fincher has no chill with his song choices here. She's not quite in a coma, but it's pretty close. So this movie is basically him figuring out who sold him out, who hurt his girl, and who hired the hit. Each one with a different reaction to their impending fate. And a different way for him to slip up, like when he was torturing this guy who then died way faster than anticipated.
Should last 6-7 minutes. Shit. Stick to the plan.
So much of it really is this deadpan comedy of errors, and I love that aspect of it. Just this guy that's so confident and sure of his actions, just fucking up while still internal monologuing about sticking to the plan and never improvising.
Need any help getting rid of that body?
Honestly, when we do get to the full brawl scene, which was super cool and well done and super well shot, it's when I'm like least engaged with the movie because it's not anywhere near as interesting to me as the conversation he ends up having with Tilda Swinton. Not that it wasn't also engaging, it's brutal to watch, but also finds time to toss in some bits like his reaction to only finding a cheese grater for a weapon. But Tilda plays an other less than stereotypical killer for hire that really drives home what we can all see. They do this because they like it.
Money was motivation. Once there was enough, could be used to buy another life. Another lie we told ourselves.
And I love everything about their conversation. Him refusing to partake in any of her food or drink before denying her her final drink of favorite whiskey. So good. This'll never hit the witty tightness of The Social Network or the gritty intrigue of Zodiac, but it still has so many beloved Fincher staples as it examines ideas of obsession, precision, and power. I don't think it'll ever crack my top 5 for Fincher, but it's still an excellent addition to the family. But when I walked out, a strange thing started happening. My perfectly laid plans started to collapse a bit. My flight was delayed, so I wandered over to Hey Lucy's for a single drink and some work before my flight, a second drink and some work before my flight. Then I realized I'd be left with enough time to get the real goods, Uncle Tetsu's Japanese cheesecake. And I know exactly how to get there. Union Station. I've been here before. I know where I'm going. Nothing could trip me up, except for after securing it going the wrong way to the airport shuttle and having to venture out to find an Uber instead. But it was fine. We still made it to the airport just in time to have my flight canceled again. The perfect plan was getting slightly less perfect as I was stuffed into a tiny airport overpacked with delayed flyers, but we are managing. Much like our killer, no matter how much control and order we try to maintain over every aspect of our lives, the things we can't anticipate will always be the things to throw us off. And that seems like so much of what he struggles to accept. His heart rate pounding when things start to deviate, progressively working to convince himself that he is that machine, that it always goes to plan. And a lot of the time he is those things, but not right now. I've seen some people saying he's just a total screw up, but that clearly isn't the case. We see him be highly proficient throughout this movie. He just gets rattled after a slip up and then things get personal. And all these pieces are a super interesting exploration. I just wish there was a little something more in that revenge mission to grab onto. Though I do have to say, I think it's funny that I've seen 3 different movies about hitman assassins this year. One where the hitman is a fabrication, and 2 where the killers recite mantras to themselves over and over again. I am a killer. I am an assassin. Honestly, while I was sitting there, I noticed that there were a lot more similarities between Aggro Drift and the killer than I would ever like to admit, but hey, at least the killer's actually doing something with it. But in those delays, I really had some time to keep mulling over the film. And I just kept coming back to the scene with Tilda Swinton. Something that felt so much like it should have been the final exchange of the movie, but it's not. So some spoilers going in here. I want to talk about this and the end of the movie a little bit, so just jump ahead to this timestamp if you want to avoid anything and watch the end of the video where I'm gonna veer off into weird land. Well, yes, so much of my mind going back to that moment is because of Swinton's performance. It's what she provides to the story that's so striking and memorable. Trying to shake his resolve, make him question why he does what he does, where he gets his enjoyment in it all. Just seeing the contrast of the different types of people who do this job while she's ultimately just a human who knows she's about to die and desperately trying to find a way out. While also coming to terms with it happening to the point you may wonder why she isn't putting up more of a fight, but she tries at the last moment. He just beats her to the punch. And it made me realize that it is those moments before someone dies that I seem to enjoy the most. The different ways they try to reckon with it, how he does each kill, the rules he breaks out of a kindness he claims not to have.
I can't just disappear. My children need my life and shit.
And instead of making her disappear, he just makes it look like she broke her neck falling down the stairs. It was a kindness, one that directly goes against his empathy mantra and his self-preservation. Bodies mean evidence.
Forbid empathy.
And how genuinely funny it was for him to think he had so much control over that situation with Edward. I was like, oh man, look at him go, the precision, the control, just to have him immediately die. It was so good. Now I know that after all that, people are confused. Why did he leave the client alive at the end? He's been cleaning up loose ends that he probably didn't need to worry about the entire movie. Why does this guy actually get to live? Because to me, he should have pissed him off more. This guy's openly admitted that he didn't know who he was hiring a hit on, just that he was offered a cleanup package for the botched hit and said, yeah, sure. Like it was an extra detailing package on a car. But that was literally a moment of self-preservation.
Risky, this one. Police tend to match their effort in direct proportion to the victim's net worth.
That he can't 100% guarantee that there wouldn't be some kind of crumbs leading back to him.
Once I see his eyes, I'll have a pretty good idea how this is gonna go.
So he needs to see this guy's eyes to figure out if he's someone who actively wants him dead and would continue hunting him down, or if it was just that package add-on for the botched hit. Which it absolutely seems to be. It takes him so long to realize who this person pointing a gun at him could possibly be. So that's why he just leaves him off with a warning, one that'll probably have him scared shitless for months at least.
If I have to come back, maybe a radioactive speck on the lip of your favorite coffee mug. A slow death from painful facial necrosis.
At least that's why I assume he left him alive, so that he can now just go off and enjoy a life of luxury with his money and relax with his girl, but I'm sure that won't last. We see this little twitch in his eye right before we cut to credits.
And the bear squints. You're not really out here for the hunting, are you?
Because at the end of the day, it's not about the money. Our killer's final thoughts bring us back to the beginning of the movie, where he compared the many to the few, clearly seeing himself as one of the few before ultimately realizing that his mantra wasn't something he could fully adhere to. He's not a machine, things do get personal, he is in fact one of the many.
Whatever it takes, make sure you're one of the few. Maybe you're just like me. One of the many.
And I'm sure he won't commit to this life of retirement. So, you might be wondering if I'm regretting my whirlwind trip to Toronto to see a movie that won't be cracking my top 5 of the year. And the answer is no, baby! Even for the bit, I think it's hilarious. But that kind of brings me to my bigger issue and final complaint of this video. Why did I have to get on a plane to watch a David Fincher movie? It's a similar question that I would have been asking over the holiday season had I not seen Glass Onion at TIFF. Why do I have to get on a plane to watch the follow-up to one of the biggest original story box office successes in years?
It's just dumb!
And it really just comes down to how Netflix chooses to release their movies. They could easily build up that strong promotion, get people in theaters like Apple did with Killers of the Flower Moon, could have had some incredible Killers double features. But no. Obviously, I understand part of it. Netflix's main objective is to get people watching original Netflix content on Netflix. They're paying the big bucks to have it made or to distribute it. I understand why they want it locked behind their subscription paywall. They do those limited theatrical runs to ensure awards eligibility, and that is really it. But I think that a stronger theatrical push could only help the numbers on Netflix. Obviously, I'm not suggesting that every Netflix original movie needs to be in theaters. Like, I don't need to see Tall Girl 3 in theaters. But for the stuff they know is good, or the stuff that they've invested a ton of money in big directors making, the stuff that you could get people really excited about, doing that bigger theatrical marketing push can only be positive. We know that things do better on streaming services if they have an initial buzz in the theatrical setting first. I know for a while the issue was how fast you could put something on a streaming service once it's been in theaters beforehand, but I feel like we took care of a lot of that stuff during the pandemic. Like, we got stuff simultaneously releasing now and it is still performing super well in theaters. Obviously, I know that The Killer wouldn't have brought in as much money as Five Nights at Freddy's in its opening weekend, but the point remains. In the age of streaming services, there are so many movies that'll never see life outside a TV screen. Hell, now there's movies that'll never see life outside a boardroom because they want the tax write-off. But if it's something you're already putting in theaters, why not do a proper push of it? Even if you still only do the 2-week run, which is a nice increase over the usual 1-week run, why not do a wide release for those 2 weeks? Get people excited to watch the movie once it's streaming, or I don't know, even let them know that it's coming. I keep running into people that are surprised that this Fincher movie is already out. Netflix consistently has amazing creators making amazing movies for them that then just don't get the level of love they should because there's no room for that phenomenon to build anymore. We just had a summer filled with amazing theatrical turnouts, both for new content and beloved directors. And while the strikes did just officially come to an end, we still have a nice little window here that Killer would have fit in perfectly, just to bring people together for a unified love. It doesn't have to hit the levels of Barbenheimer, we're not expecting that. But people do like being part of an experience. We saw it with Barbenheimer, we saw it with Talk to Me, and Fincher, like Scorsese, is a director that people will rally behind. It just feels a little short-sighted on Netflix part when they've consistently struggled to have their movies turn into the pop culture drivers the same way they have with their series. Unless it's hate watch content, their movies rarely, if ever, get that same stranglehold. I love that they're willing to invest in directors, to pick up movies for distribution. I just wish they cared a little bit more about the audience experience instead of just relegating so much of it to content people are gonna pop on while they do chores. And I know that so many people prefer watching things at home, and that's great. I want people to have the option, and really just the idea that limited run doesn't always have to mean limited theaters. Basically, all that was a really long-winded way for me to say, let me watch movies in theaters with convenience, Netflix. But yeah, I think that's pretty much gonna do it. I flew to Toronto to watch The Killer. I recommend you watching The Killer at home or in theaters if you're somewhere where it's still playing. If you guys have already seen the movie, let me know what you guys are thinking down below. I know this wasn't my typical deep dive. I just kind of wanted to do something a little bit different for this one. I also got really sick this week, so that's put me behind schedule. We are cruising through as best as we can right now. But thank you all so much for watching. Thanks as always to my Patreon supporters and YouTube channel members who are the official sponsors of this video. Subscribe to the channel if you're new. Leave a like on the video if you're into that kind of thing. All my social medias are listed down below if you want to follow me there. I hope you're all having a fantastic day. I'm mostly okay, and we'll catch you all later.